Okay, so welcome to the Node.js build working group meeting for March 27th, 2025. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they would like to share? Okay, if not, I'm going to pull up the agenda, which I haven't quite done yet. So let me do that and we can then jump into it. According, if people can add themselves to the attendees, I will paste this in the chat. That would be great. Add myself before I forget. Okay, so the first one is the potentially transition to 1Password for secrets management. I remember we did talk a little bit about that before, and I think Ryan, if I remember correctly, the next step was for you to figure out if there were like APIs and stuff like that to do some of the things we do with what we currently have.
Yes, I've been looking for a 1Password to get access to experiment with. Like I'm trying to
Okay.
find one where I'm actually the owner of that I have, because I have
Right.
access to a lot of 1Passwords, but I need one where I'm owner of. And
Okay.
so that's the that's the experiment that I have not yet performed. So I may
Okay.
just create one of my own. But
Okay.
yeah, so there hasn't been any forward progress on that.
Okay. Well,
Um,
it sounds like you're thinking about it, so that's
yeah, yeah.
not nothing. Okay, I'll just put that in. The next one is transition from a DigiCert key locker to a zero trusted signing.
Update on that one. So the Windows release machines do not appear to be inside of the build working group's inventory. They're not in our inventory.yaml at all. They exist and they're connected to the release
They
machines.
they are, I think, are in the version of the inventory in the secrets repo.
Oh, okay. So they're
At least I hope they're there. If not, we need to talk to Stefan. But I'm pretty certain the Windows machines are in the inventory, but I think they might be in the secret one, just because of the way they're defined in Azure. There is something because of the way I think they get multiplexed on the same IP address and through different ports or something.
okay. So I wasn't aware of that. So I didn't know that we had whole
Yeah,
machines inside of just the secrets repo. So, but
I think that was definitely the case for the test machines. Um, so yeah, release. I can't say for definite. I'd
yeah,
have to go back and check, but I
it
think at least the test machines, some of them are only defined in the inventory in the secrets repo.
okay. There are test machines to find in our regular inventory, but in any
Okay.
case, I'm uh, managing Windows machines is pretty outside of my wheelhouse, and so um, relying
Yeah.
on
Reach reach
Stefan,
out to reach out to Stefan.
yeah, and
He's yeah.
he mentioned that he's busy with trying to get something else out the door and is focused on that for now. And since we have a
Yeah.
few months of time before this actually becomes a burning issue, my focus is going to be on the Azure side of things and setting up the accounts and setting up the things so that I
Mhm.
basically just have the secret keys to hand out and it's ready to go. So, and
Yeah.
the process that we're going through to develop a code signing infrastructure for OpenJS in general, because Appium is another OpenJS project that needs code signing for their project. So I'm going to be working with Appium and get it all set up and running with them, and then have the skids all greased basically to say, okay, here, Node, here's your keys. You need to put them into your build process to get the code signing.
Yeah.
But then the actual code signing on the machines themselves, that'll have to be Stefan will have to change the software and work with Felix on that.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It sounds good. He's concentrating on trying to get the VA upgrade switched over to CLang.
Right.
Yeah, for Node 2024. So Node 24 is supposed to be released in April this
Hmm.
coming month. So that's what he's trying to unblock. That's just a priority, what needs to happen the soonest rather than. Um, but yeah, definitely if you can't find the release machines, reach out to Stefan and ask, and maybe an oversight, or maybe there's some other reason to do with how it's been managed and set up.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
I really don't know how they're configured or how and so I don't want to go bumbling in there and accidentally
Yeah,
bull
there
in a
is.
bull in a china shop and start
Yeah, no,
knocking
no,
things over.
that's fair enough. There is some documentation in the build repo about running like Ansible on Windows against the Windows machines. But yeah, I can't remember exactly what was in there. It's theoretically possible for us to do it, but we've normally got Stefan or people from JNO Systems to help out.
Yep.
That.
And this is strictly Windows signing for my
Yes.
benefit, right? Like
Yeah,
these
Yes.
certificates are only for Windows signing. There's no universal way to do it, get certificates for everything, right?
Right. These are the
Oh,
certificates
you
that make it
can.
so that
Yeah.
when you run on Windows, it doesn't say, "Are you sure you want to trust this developer?"
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is
It's a code signing certificate. So we've been buying code signing certificates, for years.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then, was it last year we had to switch over from the old way we were signing to, I can't remember what it's called now. Like
DigiCert.
using a trust like a key store or a trust store that was being maintained.
Yeah.
So there was some transformation work done last year, and then this time around it turns out that the certificate we're now using has limited uses. So we have paid for those uses, but at some point those uses are going to run out. But I mean that was a bit of a surprise, I think, to most of us.
Yeah, we didn't know there was any limit.
Yeah.
So
That's the countdown, which is we've now Ryan's looked at it and estimated we've got a couple of months before we actually do run out. We know there's always going to be an issue if we let it get to that point. But yeah, it's good that we know ahead of time that there is a ticking time bomb there, but we've got a little bit of time to figure out how to fix that. But yeah, I mean we are code signing on Windows and we are code signing on macOS, and obviously there are different mechanisms with different different everything. So yeah, it would be nice if there was some unified way to do all of this, but yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, so that one really is just like, it sounds like you're going to do some the Azure side, so we'll have whatever's needed when Stefan becomes available, which makes sense. So sounds like you're well on top of working on what can be done, and I think we do just rely on Stefan on the Windows machines, and that continues to make sense, right?
Yep. And yeah, I don't want to step on any toes or try and fumble around in something that it's not my forte.
Okay, so the next issue is the Equinix Metal Sunset.
Yeah, I think the next action was in me, and I haven't got around to it yet. So yeah, that's still with me to pick the email chain up with the ARM folks again, and just make sure that moves on.
Right, so that's like what can we get from somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just okay. Next one, infrastructure for Orca, 2024 and beyond. I know I'd seen Ryan, you working on that in terms of like Ccache or whatever, but I don't remember anything in the last few weeks. Is that one settled down?
Sorry, which
infrastructure for Orca? It's
Orca. I'm sorry. I thought you said Oracle, and I was a little bit
Orca,
like,
yeah. What? No, there's not.
Okay, so I was just about to add an issue to the agenda that I'm typing up today. Basically, I have solved the build issue that was making the builds take about 2 hours. Long story short, there's a really weird mount point that is the shared mount point for these Orca instances, so that the Ccache is shared between ephemeral uses. Anytime the Ccache is writing to this, it's for some reason writing it as user-only permissions as a different user. Like it inherits a different user's permissions and then is not group read write. And so it can write to the cache but couldn't read from it. I have tried 6 ways to Sunday to figure out how to make it write properly.
Yeah,
it doesn't. So as a last resort, I've put a recursive change mod at the end of the macOS builds. Takes about 10-15 minutes to run, but that means the builds take 40 minutes instead of 2 hours. So I
Okay.
think that's within the window of acceptability. The figuring out 9p mount points on Intel OS X machines it's just, and it's some weird layer of edge cases about how Ccache creates files. Because like if I'm a normal user and I go create files in there, it actually creates them with the proper UMask and the proper
Right.
permissions. But Ccache creates a file off of it on a different file system and then moves them in, or it does something with the way the file system handling is happening is causing permissions to not work. So, anyways, that is working. So now I'm very confident and comfortable with Orca as our testing infrastructure for all of our tests. The builds are running within a reasonable amount of time frame, everything else. The release side of things is where there's still an issue. And this is less of an Orca issue and more of a build, maybe node main repository issue. And so I'm trying to find the my tab that has the Google Doc in it. The long story short, the OS X builds are taking like 5.5 hours to
Okay.
run on the release machines. The releases do not use Ccache. They do not try to use Ccache. They just baked into the make file is direct use of C, and C++. So my presumption is those would be sped up considerably by being able to leverage the Ccache. Most of the other releases on the other architectures use Ccache, so I don't think there's any reason we're avoiding that for releases. I think it's just Mac OS. Now, this is baked into the make file. I'm not super familiar with the actual build process on Node itself.
Yep.
So, Ash, I believe, was the one who wrote this last iteration a few years ago.
Yep.
So I don't know who to reach out to make changes there, and I don't know what changes necessarily to make. So I'm kind of hoping to punch this back to the community to make the builds faster. And so that's I'm adding a new issue to go into that specifically, but I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a node or in node build or where that goes.
I guess I'm thinking like we don't like Ash was part of the Red Hat team years ago, and it was kind of as part of the build work related to Mac that he did that under. So like there's no natural person I can think of unless Richard, you know of somebody else that I know is gonna be like, yep, I know Mac builds. I know how Ccache works, I can do that. So we can ask, but I'm not sure we're gonna find anybody else who's gonna say like, yeah, okay, I know how to do that.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to like somewhat put this on the release team to be like, look, if you want your releases to be faster, find somebody that knows how to change Macs or like I just don't know like how like with
It's
our
not really the release team scope either, though, right? Like the release
yeah
team, they run the CIs to generate the releases, but they don't build, configure, or set up the things that actually do the build, right? They just do the steps that are necessary, look at the results, and so really
yeah
the Mac specific knowledge when it's outside of like, hey, I'm contributing a Mac fix is really has traditionally been in the build group, right? It's the people who've done that. And
got
unfortunately,
it
we don't really have anybody other than you who's been doing the work, right?
right.
Who's the Mac person or Mac motivated person is kind of we could see if there's somebody interested in working on it, but it'd be kind of like hey, is there anybody out there versus knowing that somebody is going to step up and do it.
Right.
Like the
And
test.
really there's nothing Mac specific about this really. It's more just making changes to the main make file in Node to make it work like the rest of the make file does for
So my
like
first
how
question on that is like for test we use Ccache, right? Like so in that makefile, there's already something that uses Ccache
Yeah,
on.
but they're specific targets in the makefile for releases.
Sure.
So I'm guessing what Ryan's referring to is that the specific like makefile target to build the PKG installers on Mac OS actually runs through the build twice, once with Rosetta and once without. And yeah, I mean, I'm not overly familiar with those. I know they're there and they sort of work. But yeah, I don't know if it's like relying on some path, whatever's on the path. Like the usual way. So there's two ways you can invoke Ccache. You can either prepend your compiler commands with like Ccache. So you could say like Ccache, C++, for example.
Yep.
Or you can create a symbolic link to the Ccache binary called C++ and stick the path to the C++ symbolic link that's pointing at Ccache on the path. And then Ccache has some wonderful logic to work out that, oh, I've been run, but I've actually been run from a symbolic link.
Yep.
And that symbolic link was called C++, so I'll go and find the C++ to execute. That
Oh,
generally works. I don't know how it works in Rosetta, given that the makefile is doing both the ARM build and the x64 build. And I don't know, like, for example, if the Ccache is architecture agnostic or whether it can cope with the same Ccache being invoked in the different environments. But
okay.
I would suspect that if we were using Ccache in the release builds before, it would have been all through path manipulation and having on the path the symbolic links to the Ccache binaries. I think so. This is getting really out of my familiarity now. I think Homebrew may have the ability to create the symbolic links for Ccache.
Okay, that
Or if
that
not, that
actually
may have been
gives
something
me
that
something I
actually,
can like charge in on. Like
yeah.
I can look at the images for the release nodes,
Or it
and
may have been something that was in the Ansible scripts that
yeah.
Ash might have written, which could that could feasibly be the case that maybe the Ansible script set something up which is not in the the base ephemeral setup.
Okay, so we might not have to change the build at all. It can just be using CC, and then if it's in a place that has Ccache, it'll
Yeah, I mean,
Ccache configure symbolic links.
this
Okay,
is assuming. I am assuming that we were using Ccache before when we were running on our own machines. At least I don't recall the builds taking as long as 5 hours on, apart from in the
right.
really worst case that we know that we did actually have a cache on the machine. So there was a way of getting it working before, and I suspect that would be that would probably be where I would recommend
All
looking
right,
for.
great. I will sink some time into that and
Yeah.
figure that out.
Couple more questions. Like, how do we get Ccache on the test? I think we're getting, you said we have Ccache running on the test runs, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does it work there? Do you know?
It's in the there's a detect compiler, and I think it finds Ccache.
The
So
select
like
compiler?
yeah, like if you look at the make file, or it like the test builds literally say Ccache, 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 like they're executing Ccache directly. And so
Right. So
it's
that's what I'm just trying to understand. Like, if it's working in tests, so select compiler script is one I'm familiar with. So like, is that where? Right. Okay. So I can see that our select compiler script, like here, does that. Like, that's in the build repo where we say basically like, okay, we're going to do a build, figure out the right compiler. We initially introduced this to actually add some extra things on some of the IBM platforms, and
Yeah,
now
I don't
it's
recall us having Mac OS stuff in there, but
right.
um,
Yeah.
it's
Now is
possible.
any Mac?
It's possible it's in the test job itself. In the job configuration.
Right. That would be the other place to look. Is like, is it the test job? So
But
that's
there
what I
is a
was trying to
difference.
figure out. Like,
So,
we know
so,
how it.
so yeah,
Go ahead.
one of the differences is that there is some slight difference in the way that the release builds are done compared to the test builds, and that
Yeah.
may or may not be affected by. So usually you can set like was it CC and CXX environment variables.
Yep.
So if you put like Ccache CC in your CC environment variable, that would usually result in the compilers being set through the environment variables. I don't know if that's that would work in the release. I would need to look at the release builds again to figure out how the makefile is doing the release builds to figure out if the environment variables will work in that scenario or whether the fact that it is running things in another sort of subshell to get Rosetta would mean that you wouldn't have those propagated through to the subshell.
Yeah,
I don't
taking
know
it.
enough about Max here, so I'm speculating. So there might be some differences. I mean, it might be worth checking what's in the test CI to
That's
go
what
to
I
them.
just did, and I can
Yeah, I
see
just
very
checked it.
specifically that, like in the job node test commit OSX,
Yeah.
there is some setting up of the like it's exporting things in the environment before it's building and related to Ccache. So basically what you said, Richard, in terms of like doing an export CC equals blah blah blah, the Ccache version, and maybe you're right that like because the way the job is different, the job that is in the release machines can't or doesn't do that for some reason, and therefore maybe we set those in the environment globally or something on them.
I don't know. I'm just assuming, yeah. Um, but okay. So
But yeah, that gives me something to like.
mhm,
It, it would be nice if everything worked the same way, but we do have different images for release than we do for
okay.
tests. So I can very easily go on those release images and change CC and C plus plus to be Ccache and let it figure its way out. Um,
Yeah, it's wonderful magic it does with scanning the path afterwards to figure out what it should reinvoke. Um,
What would be interesting is like what did we in which step did we lose it? Like, 'cause if we
I
if we
think it
so
had
was I think it was
Ansible,
when I rebuilt the images.
right, but if we used Ansible to do those, shouldn't it have done the same things as before, or did we?
It may have been a manual change on the things that wasn't part of the
Yeah, we
Ansible.
didn't actually have in the C cache. That's possible. Yeah.
Okay, but that definitely gives me a place to look to start with. Um,
And there is a
because
little
yeah,
bit of just looking at the release job, there is a little bit of stuff, at least in some of the steps for
so
C
I
cache.
I did a very quick scan, well, GitHub search, and there is like some Ansible stuff from macOS with Ccache. So I'm not sure whereabouts that ends up being invoked in the whole like chain of Ansible setup, but there was something we had in the past for adding things to paths. I've got a vague feeling that at some point the path was wrong and it was not pointing at where the C cache actually was, but at least the intent is there somewhere in Ansible. Um,
this is I just linked the oh
yeah.
wait, my sorry, I just realized I'm responding directly to Michael and not to the whole group.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
I don't know why they like Zoom does its thing like that, but you very easily get into that state.
right. I didn't know that there was an easy way to secretly talk to different Zoom members.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah, I can see in the stuff you posted in the makefile that uh, the makefile is setting the CC and CXX variables so
yep,
that it can pass in the architecture when it's using Rosetta to build like the Intel binaries on ARM,
yep.
which means that even if the job set those variables, the makefile would overwrite them when it reinvokes the build for the Intel part of the package build. So that's probably why it's not done through environment variables in the release build, whereas the test build can do that because we're not running Intel builds on the ARM machines in the test CI. We're
Right.
running Intel builds on the Intel VMs and ARM builds on the ARM VMs. But in the release CI, because we're building a universal binary, we're building the universal binary on the ARM machines. So we're building both
Mhm.
ARM and Intel on the ARM machine, and then whatever mechanism that bolts them together to make the universal binary for macOS. So we don't build universal binaries in the test CI, but we do in the release CI, and that's the added complication in terms of setting compilers, um, because it looks like the way that the builds are building the Intel builds on ARM is to pass flags through in the environment variables. So That's why the makefile is setting those things for the release builds, but aren't setting them for the test builds.
Okay, I will definitely focus on the making CC a symlink
Okay.
and see if I can't find where in
So then
Ansible
if
that
it's a
might have been
symlink,
wrong.
we'll end up with the right behavior for both, like Rosetta and the other one.
I hope so. Assuming that like Ccache is not architecture uh, sensitive, in that it
Right.
doesn't matter what architecture the Ccache binary itself is, it can still invoke.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and the presumption is this is how it must have worked before because we didn't
Yes.
have the 5.5 hour
Right.
builds.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Okay. Good discussion then. So it sounds like
great.
you've got a path forward to take a look at, which is great.
Yep. In which case, I will also I just created a new issue, but I will actually pause that.
Okay, we can move on to the next one, which is new machine requirement replacement of Equinix x64 servers.
That is still the I'm going to call it the rsync server. I still need to
Yeah.
rebuild that.
Okay.
The I think I'm still going to just build that on MNX because they were the ones that were offering the replacement in the first
Yep.
place. I definitely ran into a service limits with MNX when I was trying to reprovision some other SmartOS machines.
Okay.
So I got to make sure that we've got the space there, but I think we do for one more machine. I don't know what the machine requirements are because it's hard to tell what sort of memory and CPU these sort of standby backups, but also offering a often rarely used service is. Like I'm not sure if we're
You might just ask MNX if you're running up into the resource limits, if
yeah
you can get a bit more, right? Rather than trying to struggle to, who knows? Maybe they might say, "Hey, this is all we can do," but they might
yeah
also just say, "Sure,
no
it's not a problem," and then
I
that saves you a bunch of time. That's totally worth it. So
yeah I think I have enough. I just want to make sure that I
okay,
don't provision this system because the problem is the system is going to be a little bit of a pet because we don't have like all of like I don't think this machine is in Ansible at all, or if it is, it's not fully like the rsync service and all these different things that it's doing.
Yeah, the inventory, it's in the inventory, but I don't know that or think that the setup is actually in Ansible, or if it is, it might be in the standalone stuff that never
Yeah,
actually running Anger.
but
Um,
now
right.
might be the right time to fix that, right?
Yeah, that might be the
Right?
right
Like
time to
if you
fix
can
that
do it
because
through Ansible versus manually doing it, that would be a good. Otherwise, we may never do it, right?
yeah, it's the issue of like I don't want to accidentally size this machine like undersize it,
Yeah,
and then while I'm going through this Ansible stuff, then not necessarily have the confidence. Okay, well I'll just tear it down and rebuild it and then run Ansible and it should all be fine. It's like that's a
yeah.
little hesitant to do that. So um, it should work, but it's just a. So I'm just trying to make sure I get at least close enough with the resource sizing of how big
Yep,
of a machine this should be to not have to
makes
do that.
sense. Okay, that takes us to the end of the agenda. I don't know if there's any other topics or things we should chat about. Okay, well, if not, thanks for everybody's time. And we will see you in GitHub next time. I'm going to